over the past maybe 2 years, I've really just been listening to so much music from, especially from Mali, from Cabo Verde, from Guinea, from Congo, and I love it. Like, and I, so that kind of,
You are listening to NIMDA Talk.
I do have another guest that I'm really, really excited to talk to. I'm going to let him introduce himself and then we'll get our conversation started. Hello, who do we have here today?
hello, my name is William Oshodako, born and raised in Ghana. So I am a lecturer at Newcastle University, teaching urban planning.
How did you end up going into geography? I mean, with all due respect to geographers, geography is not almost the most highly desired subject. How did you end up in geography?
The subject of what courses I chose to study, I think have always been quite a tense issue. Well, they were quite tense when I was young because one of my uncles always had this high dreams that I should do science. So he always thought that I think my dad always maybe listened to other people who thought, oh, maybe you could do architecture, you could do planning or land economy because there's some opportunities in there. And I think my dad won out on that on that tussle. So I also liked reading and writing and kind of, yeah, I think I was always into perhaps the more uh artsy type of knowledge in a way. I never really liked to do like even elective maths, which was probably the hardest thing I would do, which leaned to science or maybe biology in terms of general science, these things. I like them, but to an extent. But I love reading books or kind of making connections between music lyrics and what they meant in the dictionary. So I always had like that side that I think it perhaps linked well with general arts. Yeah, so in a way, I kind of follow that path of perhaps a few advice to my parents about, oh, he's done art, so maybe if he does something around planning, architecture, or something of that ilk, then that would help because there are opportunities there, which it wasn't really the case. But I enjoy planning a lot, and then I kind of followed up on it in my postgrad.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how your transition from KNUST to studying abroad happened? Looking back, are there any things that you remember that would be beneficial to somebody listening to us with a similar objective or goal?
Yeah, there was some kind of understanding that was brewing in the people of my cohort
Mhm.
that there were less and less opportunities. This was a time when I think there had been some kind of whether it's some kind of agreement or news floating about that there was not as much public sector employment because of some loan conditionalities or something. And I
Mhm.
remember as development planning students, you are dealing with development organizations and things like that. So we kind of knew a bit about the kind of development landscape. And it was really a kind of a source of disappointment and realizing that, oh, it's going to be actually quite hard to perhaps get a job. And there was also a sense of impatience as, being young brings. There was a sense of impatience that I don't want to stay at home after doing my national service and things like that. So those were, I think, the factors, maybe the push factors. I really didn't have as much pull factor because I didn't know what to expect. Maybe there was some element of watching TV and seeing, what is on the other side of whether it's in the Europe, the US, Australia, these places, the West generally. So those things were there, and I think those were perhaps the factors that drew me to yeah start applying for certain things, and eventually I got some advice from people. You should try this school or that school, and so those were the factors that really kind of pushed me to apply and travel.
Okay. Wow, wow. So let's assume that you've been looking around, you've applied. Fortunately, you got admission. talk to us about how like the journey from Ghana to Europe. How was it
Mhm.
for you? Was it your
To I think the first time it was like a postgraduate certificate where you did a bunch of short courses in different places in Europe. So I think I stayed like 4 months each in Belgium, Austria, Denmark, and Spain in 2 years. So that in itself was such a big change from my first 23, 24 years not traveling as much to 2 years or 3 years after that traveling to these places.
and how did you cope with that? Now you are in Europe for the first time. I'm sure the food wasn't really a problem, was it?
um, I think I've always been lucky in the sense that I'm not picky with food as much.
Okay.
So I think I remember being able to perhaps over time kind of just you know find things that I would like at the supermarket. But I definitely have some first experiences of the first time I had olives.
Okay.
I had like a sore throat after that, or sun-dried tomatoes, like these kind of things. I had like blisters on my lips after that, and I remember being okay. This my body's allergic to this, but it wasn't. It just the next time I ate it, it was fine. My body was just not used to that. So
Right. Oh, that's interesting. And so the food wasn't really a problem. I mean, with a few cases of sore throat and blisters. But and I know you said it was some type of a postgraduate program where you moved around quite a bit. Um, on the academic side, and I'm asking this question specifically for some of our friends, young Africans who are contemplating studying abroad, coming to the other side of the world for their postgraduate studies. Looking back at your own experiences, how were you able to navigate the academic challenges of being an African student within sort of that European context?
right. I think for me it was kind of fascinating in the beginning because it's something that I also realized in Ghana was that I get very excited
Mhm.
by learning new things. So in a way, I remember actually in Ghana having this conversation once with some friends in our first year in planning, and I was like, "Isn't this exciting?" And they were like, "What do you mean? This is work?" So I remember feeling like, "Wow, this is so fascinating! Like, there's so much I don't know about the rest of the world, and I'm learning it through this program."
Right.
And subsequent programs after that. But I I think over time I started to realize like, okay, there is a very I'm not learning as much about Ghana. I'm not learning as much about other African countries. And I think that kind of experience, especially during my PhD in Italy, was when I started to realize that, oh, actually, my master's degree programs and the postgraduate programs were actually very related to kind of European planning. And I have to actually do the almost like cover a lot of ground if I want to actually do something in Ghana. So my PhD, I decided to focus on Ghana and start a whole new topic, which was different from my postgraduate focus. So I switched focus from transport, kind of cycling, walking type research to now focusing on energy in Ghana and the kind of the oil and gas sector in Ghana. Also because I wanted to do something specifically on Ghana and kind of reconnect to debates about urbanization and different forms of urbanization that have become an area of kind of vigorous research in African countries.
You sound very grounded and very introspective. Am I correct in describing you that way?
I think I definitely try to balance things.
Mhm.
Yes, I think I definitely try to balance some things out over time, and maybe that comes with age as well. I think, but yes, I will take it that I there is a sense of groundedness that I've had to it's also, I feel like that's also a strategy to survive in some case, because the thing about traveling abroad is that you lose yourself if you're not careful.
Mhm.
You lose the sense of who you are, the language you speak, the people you connect to. And so that happens slowly, that happens unconsciously. So you kind of have to have some sense of reflexivity over time. And that comes with time and experience and you know, having conversations with people and realizing, oh, you actually have no idea about what Ghana is. And I need to have that because, in a way, I have to balance out that kind of space. Otherwise, I'm just kind of perpetuating this perhaps elimination of our histories and our sense of where we come from and what we and our lives really. So I think that comes with time, and maybe also being in academia helps because
Mhm.
there's kind of an explosion of research on the global south and the call to perhaps reconnect with these provincialized forms of knowledge. So I think that also helps me personally to feel like, okay, I actually have to almost like draw myself back to my kind of core base of where I come from.
Do you think that that might also be, in some sense, related to the path that you have taken? Because I mean, I would
Mm,
imagine that somebody who spends every 4 months in a different country
yeah.
um, gets to that place where the issue of identity becomes super important, wouldn't you say?
Yes, yes, definitely. I had to actually, yeah, I remember when I started working in Newcastle. That was probably the first time so this was 2 years ago. So that was the first time in maybe 8 years that I stayed at a place for over a year.
Wow.
Yes. And I was talking to family about this, and there was a kind of a survival mode in a lot of
Mhm.
this, that it was then very hard for me to feel kind of stable.
Yeah.
So I had to really go through a process of kind of working on myself to actually feel grounded and feel in touch with where I live and the neighborhood and the people. And also having a dog helps because we have a park here and you get to meet a lot of people and feel a sense of neighborliness. But yes, it's I definitely felt very uprooted in many ways. And once you start making connections, then you have to go because your visa has run out. You have to go back to Ghana and reapply because you got this other program, or you go to Ghana to search for a job, and that also has its own issues. And then you go back again. So there was a sense of being uprooted, definitely. And I think the past 2 3 years have been almost like a healing of that process, having a more stable job after these years.
Mhm. William, there's a lot to your story I would have loved for us to unpack. But for somebody listening to us, I want us to like track your journey,
Yes,
because I
yes,
have other questions that I really want to ask. So you leave Ghana
yeah,
for your postgrad program.
yeah.
Which countries did you travel to post Ghana? Let's start from when you came in first for your postgrad education.
So yeah, so there's the postgrad one it was Belgium,
Okay.
Austria, Denmark, and Spain.
Okay. Did you need to speak any of those languages in those countries, like Spanish or Danish
No,
or okay?
no, yeah. So because the program itself with the different kind of classes and courses, they run for like 4 or 5 months, and they were all in English.
Okay. So out of those four countries,
Yeah.
which experience did you enjoy most, if you can recall?
I really enjoyed. I think first of all, I enjoyed Spain a lot because
Okay.
over time that's where I met my current wife. And but then Belgium as well because there was a big African community from Congo,
I see.
also other places that I met there that were I felt very connected to Belgium. Yes.
Okay. So after that, four country academic tour, you then moved to Italy to do your PhD?
Oh no, I moved to Scotland for my another for my master, and then I moved to Italy for
Scotland, Edinburgh then, or Glasgow?
yes, Edinburgh.
Okay, so from there to Scotland for your master's,
Yeah.
and then from Italy. How was life in Italy? I know Italy is not a very popular destination for grad school. How was life there?
Um, yeah, life was good there. Because I think some of the friends I made in Europe, kind of through those networks, I was able to hear about opportunities outside the places that normally Ghanaians would go to, which would be US or Germany or UK. So I heard of opportunities in Italy, and so I applied for a PhD there in Milan. And yeah, it was good because Milan is a very international city, a kind of also a very different approach to uh planning and things that I'm interested in. So it was quite good. And some of my friends that I'd met were also in the PhD there. So I had like two people I knew there, and I also became very good friends with my PhD mates. It was quite good, but I was definitely in a bubble. If I had to go and register at the local town hall office, my registration and or to get anything done bureaucratically, it was very it was very difficult because I had a few Italian classes, but it was very difficult, and I just couldn't really exist outside the bubble, the English bubble for too long.
Can I safely assume that your Italian was woefully inadequate then?
Very inadequate, yes. Very inadequate. One thing I realized throughout the journey was that I when I went back to Ghana, as
Mhm.
most people who live abroad do, there's a, you were a bit misunderstood in terms of people thinking, oh, you're rich, or life is sorted, everything is fine. Boga, like, you have to give us money, friends, and
Right.
I'm happy to do that, obviously, but also there is that pressure. Um, and also when I am in Europe and I meet people from Ghana, I also get a bit misunderstood because a lot of people who move to Europe,
Mhm.
maybe they stay in two, three places maximum. So seeing someone who has lived in, I don't know, like 10 different countries, they just don't understand so I felt a bit misunderstood on both counts of why are you moving so much, or why are you not rich? So that kind of thing became part of it. I think the advice I would give is just, really do something that makes you happy. This has to be true to who you are. Don't follow what people are saying in terms of the what the traveling abroad represents, because there's a lot of challenges. I remember this, there's this song that it constantly comes into my head every time I'm having issues abroad, which is Abutra Bravo. I always remember that song. I always remember that song. And
William,
I'll
I
say,
think you would have a career in music if you choose it.
I always remember that song, and because when that song came out, I don't remember. I was maybe 8 or 7, so I didn't really know what it meant. But every now and then, it'll come into my head, and I'll be like, "They were right." So it's not, the grass is not always green on the other side. There's a lot of struggle, and on my side, I consider myself very lucky as well because I know family members and friends who, for instance, traveled through, the north of Africa and ended up in Southern Europe, and so many horrible stories that you hear, and especially when I was in Spain and Italy. So it's make sure, if you have something good going, maybe what you need is to expand your opportunities, but don't approve everything. If what you have going in Ghana is gonna work. But I know that, this is easy saying it from my side. So as long as whatever you want to do makes you happy, do it.
Do you feel that I would assume that then your decision to move to the UK after your PhD, should I say, was premeditated in the sense that
Mm.
it was carefully thought through. Obviously, the opportunity presented itself, but how was that decision made? Did you have opportunity to, for example, go back to Ghana or work in different contexts? How did you decide to take the less traveled academic path?
Yeah, so I after my PhD, I was in Ghana actually for a year.
Okay.
I went through a couple of interviews in Ghana for teaching jobs. I got an opportunity actually in the US. That was the first one. But because of COVID, there was a lot of red tape that it became even more red. And eventually, I saw this opportunity in the UK to do a research associate, like a postdoc position, and I knew the people who were working on the project. I had actually contacted them years before that, and so I was really excited to work with them. And the projects were very much in sync with my PhD, and I felt that this was really something I could contribute to. So I think I leapt at the opportunity and I kind of dropped the other opportunities that I was following up on, and I took this one. So I think it's a combination of being able to work in an English speaking context like the UK, but also being able to work with really some of the most interesting people in my field that I've always wanted to work with during my PhD. So I kind of left at this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And now you are working as a lecturer.
Yeah.
How is that going? How is that new landscape, if I want to borrow some lexicon from the geography dictionary? How is that new landscape of lecturing and teaching and research? How is that going?
It's been great. I really like the people at my department in planning. Everyone has been very helpful and kind of really helping me to settle in and to kind of find my footing. They've been very patient with me in terms of this is my first year teaching anything consistently. I mean, last year was, so this would be my second year. Balancing teaching and research has been a bit of a learning curve. So I think it requires a bit of self restraint in terms of, okay, I don't have to look at my email until maybe 3 p.m., those kind of things,
Right.
which is hard to do. I'm still finding the rhythm of that a bit more as time goes on, but I really love it. I think also the students in the project, in the departments, there's some opportunities for them to do bits of internship and bring experience on your final year. So I really like the structure of the programs because you get to work with people in practice as well, and they bring new ideas, and it kind of also challenges your own thinking and makes you a better researcher, but also just in general being able to improve what you teach on. And I think, yeah, the probably the most interesting thing or the most important thing about teaching is you being highly interested in the topic. And I find myself being interested every time I learn something new. I can't wait to kind of synthesize that and teach it with the students or discuss it. So it's been a good year and a half working in Newcastle, and I hope that it gets even better. I think I'm still finding my rhythm of teaching and speaking in front of students and uh, trying to kind of let go of the fact that I'm not going to remember everything I read or
Right.
wrote. That I still think is quite tough, but I'm still trying to find, I guess, the sweet spot in terms of how to deliver
Yeah.
courses. Yeah.
Interesting. I recall when I start my teaching career. I wouldn't say um it's any more longer than yours, but I started in the US, and when
Yeah.
I accepted my first position, I remember talking to an older um professor, and he was telling me that teaching was a performance, and that anytime you go into class, you have to think of yourself as an artist standing before an audience. And I had never
Yes.
conceptualized teaching that way, but after a while, I noticed he was right. There's that element of an artist who stands before an audience and literally performs, which I found that sort of conceptualization very very interesting. I think my last question will be, well, last but one question will be that when you are not spending time with family or taking your dog for a walk, I didn't even ask the name of your dog. What's the name of your dog? If you don't
So
mind me asking.
oh, that's also another story. So the name of the dog is Datsui,
Okay,
which
that's way.
is
Yes.
Chinese for big mouth.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
because my wife lived in China for a few years and he was a rescue dog, like on the street.
Okay.
She brought him over to Spain and then to UK.
Are there any projects or recreational activities going on your end?
I I think I don't have as much, unfortunately. I
Mhm.
read from time to time, but I my job is to read, so I
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
don't necessarily find it cathartic to read.
Uh-huh.
I really enjoy stand-up comedy.
Okay.
So we go every month in Durham, which is near Newcastle where I live. They have a comedy show in the city, like a auditorium. So we go as and when we can. I probably probably yeah, that's the thing I consume
Mhm.
most. Apart from that, yeah, I'm kind of it's kind of a it's becoming kind
Workaholic.
of a boring workaholic life, unfortunately.
So I think it's a good time to share, final word. Again, like I mentioned in our discussion, I mean, the whole point of doing this is maybe just to um, motivate, influence, younger people by trying to sort of synthesize the narratives of Africans from diverse backgrounds. And I'm really happy that we got to sort of hear your story. Do you have any final words for somebody listening on the other side?
I well, off the top of my head, I think my story is really one where I think looking back, it seems very tedious,
Hmm.
but it was a very privileged story because I think it really gave me a lot of exposure to the world. So I try and being appreciative to about where I've got into and how I got here.
Hmm.
And I'm hoping that anyone who is listening to this will also perhaps in whatever position they are, you can always rise and you can always do better and you can always lift yourself to a better place. That's always for sure. That's
Hmm.
something that we are always striving to do. But also appreciating the wins along the way is very important because that kind of keeps you grounded and makes you less resentful and less frustrated, especially in an academic world where someone described, for instance, a PhD to me as a retreat from life. And I've always loved that description because I remember 3 years, 3.5 years of doing a PhD and feeling like, wow, my family and extended family and friends, their life is moving on. People are marrying, people are having kids, and you are in a research project where, but then that also makes me not appreciate the fact that I'm in a privileged position where I'm being paid to learn and discover. So appreciating those wins on the way, I think is a good uh step, as well as obviously trying your hardest and not giving up and doing what makes you happy.
Thank you very much. I've absolutely enjoyed our discussion today. I think your last words were quite insightful, and it just rang a bell in my mind about the different strands of privilege that
Yeah.
that we have, and sometimes it's very hard to notice it. But you are right, and um, for me to have gotten almost half an hour of your time on a Saturday night, I think I have to really appreciate that opportunity and, and the privilege to talk to you. And I know that our listeners have enjoyed hearing you talk about your story. One of the things I really appreciate is that the story is still unfolding. And then who knows, in the future, you may come back to give us another chapter. Is that something that you'd be interested in?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Uh,
That would be great. Yeah.
all right. Well, thank you very much, William, and we will connect again at some point. Thank you for coming on our podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.